Hello there. In this lecture, we're going to talk about a widespread technique how to create dynamic web pages. In the title, I said PHP and friends, but what I really meant is that I will talk about PHP, but there are lots of similar languages which work the same way. But I choose PHP because I think that's the mostly used. For instance, Facebook uses PHP. But I don't really want to focus on the language itself, but rather on how the pages are generated. So let's look into that. So in the previous section, we had a web page, which was an HTML file. So it contained HTML and some other HTML tags. And it was all static. So you just downloaded an HTML file. Now in case of PHP and similar languages, what happens is that you have a PHP file. So it's a .php. And it partly contains HTML too. But at some point, it contains a tag. This is a question mark, PHP. And then inside is actually PHP source code. And after that, it can be, again, HTML. So what happens when you try to load this file in the browser, first the server will see that there is PHP source code inside. So it will execute this source code. And the output of this source code is, again, HTML. So to the browser, a page will be returned which contains purely HTML, with everything which was there before. And then where the PHP source code was, it will contain the HTML code which was generated by the PHP code. So at the end, you will have pure HTML. A very important thing is that these things happen only on the server side. So on the client side, it's still pretty static. Not if you need to refresh data, you have to reload the page. And then that PHP code will be executed again on the server side, and HTML will be generated again. All right, this was already too much talking. So let's try it out. So to serve PHP applications, first you need a PHP capable web server. Luckily, the Kali Linux already has the Apache 2 web server installed, and it's configured to handle PHP as well. What we need to do is first start the web server. So service Apache 2 start. All right, we can check that it's running. It does. Then we can try whether PHP is interpreted at all. So we'll go to the server root folder, which is by default under var www/html. There's index.html. Let's create here a test.php text file and add some code. So let's edit it and insert. And as I said, everything inside this PHP kind of tag is going to be interpreted as PHP. So first I just want to do a hello world. So I say echo hello world. Let's save it and let's load it in the browser. I don't have burp yet, so just load localhost /test.php. And as you can see, we got the test hello world. Let's look at the source code, the HTML source code of this page, and it only says hello world, so you don't see the PHP tag. It's because the server executed the PHP source code, which resulted in this string hello world. So that means that PHP execution works as expected. But why is this good? It's good because we can embed PHP code in HTML to generate those parts which are not static. To try that out, we are going to extend our earlier grand application whoisyourdaddy.html. So let's copy it here into the web root. That was in root/exercises/static HTML whoisyourdaddy. I'll copy it here and rename it to whoisyourdaddy.php. And then open. Yes. So first we are gonna add a form. So what we want to do is that this page can be reused not only to talk to Luke, but to anybody else. So we'll first make a form where you can submit your name, and then Darth Vader tells you that he is your father. Sounds good, doesn't it? No. So let's start with the form. In the body, I add form action equals to who is your daddy.php, so that the request will be sent to the same PHP file. Method is get. It could be post or something else, but get is the simplest. And then it has one input field called name, which is, as I said, input, and it's a type of text, and its name is name, because we are submitting a name. And there is other input, which will be the submit button. So it's a type submit, and the text on the button should be submit. And with that, our form is ready. Now actually, I still add a line break here so that it looks better. I save it and let's reload. So who is your daddy.php? Looks right, doesn't it? So there's a form with an input field where we can submit, and as you can see, the input is transmitted in the URL as a parameter. This happens because we choose the method get, so it will send the get request to the server, and the get request, if there are parameters, they are transmitted in the URL. Just that you know, this is not a good place to transmit confidential data. because it will be stored by the browser cache or firewall logs or load balancers or even in the web server log. So just don't use get when you're transmitting confidential data. But now we send the data, but nothing happens with it on the server side. So let's change that. Let's go back to our file. And what we want is that here it doesn't say look, it says something which is sent in the name parameter. So now let's delete look. Let's add PHP code to do that. So I will add PHP. And here's the closing tag. And then everything inside this will be considered PHP code. So what we want the name, and it is in the get request. This is a variable of PHP which contains all the parameters from a get request. And from there, we want the parameter called name. And then we just want to return this name as HTML code to the HTML page. And with that, it should be ready. So let's see. I'm your father, Gary. Well done. Now here, this is all the PHP what we are using. The rest is HTML. But it's pretty small, but here we have all the computing power of PHP. We could do anything which can be done with PHP to calculate the information what we want to return. Like we could do, for instance, we could turn the input name to all uppercase. We can do that with the function called str, so string to upper. It's a built-in function of PHP. Let's save and reload the page. I come here and instead of Gary with capital, I just type Gary lowercase and submit. And then I get I'm your father, Gary uppercase.
It is useless to resist.
So now you can see that here the PHP code, you could do basically anything. PHP is a very strong language. Your possibilities are almost unlimited. Another side note here, this page right now is absolutely vulnerable because it contains a cross-site scripting vulnerability. We will talk about that later on. I just wanted to put it out here so that you don't write code such as this in productive websites. All right, so let's just recap this lecture. With PHP and similar languages, you can extend HTML by being able to generate code dynamically when the page is loaded. With this, you have the full computing power of the particular language, such as PHP. As I said, that still only happens on the server side. So the client side is still static, so you always have to reload the page when you want to update the data. I suggest you to experiment with PHP a little bit, try to write some more complex code, and if you feel that you are more or less understanding how PHP works, then I will see you in the next lecture. Take care. Bye.